Good morning, quilt people. It is time to keep on going with this project, which I'm really excited about. Today, we're going to be doing some additional cutting, some additional piecing, and strip piecing is more specifically. And then we're going to be covering pressing. Okay, this is a really important skill that you need to master because we're not ironing. Okay, so it's really important that you know the difference. So, why am I holding this? Just ADD. Anyhow, now what am I doing? So yeah, that's what we're going to be covering today. And so I'm going to get started with the next step on these strips that we put together, right? So we have the fours, the twos, and the ones. Let's address the ones first, okay? We are going to grab these little guys, right, that don't have a partner sewn on, and we're going to cut them into 2-inch strips. Now, I have this really amazing ruler that I love that came from Quilty Box. If you don't know about Quilty Box, it's super fun. It's like, you know those like Stitch Fix and things like that you can send away for, and they send you a box of clothes, right? You know, things like that. Well, this sends you a box of quilting fabric, material, all kinds of, fun things that you get every month in a subscription box. Anyhow, little off track. 2-inch, okay? I love a 2-inch ruler like this, and so we're just gonna go through and cut all of these 2 inches wide, okay? Because they're already perfect this way, 3.75. We're just gonna cut them this way, 2 inches each. Let's go ahead and do that first. So from our pile where we had the ones, we're just gonna take this guy, right? And then line it up at a perfect 90-degree angle, right? This is pretty good on the end, so I'm actually just gonna cut this at 2 inches here. Perfect. And cut. There's a 1. All right. And so we're going to keep on going down here. All right. And just creating these little rectangles that are 3.75 by 2 inches. And those will serve as little 1 blocks where we can kind of insert them into our work as we go along creating our actual rows. Right, our rows of strip pieced rectangles. I have my ones done, just a nice little variety. I probably have maybe 30 here, but those are all cut. That's the easiest one to do. Now we're going to move on to the twos. This next step is probably almost more important than anything else we're going to learn in this series, okay? So you have to get this right. Let's look at it. What we're doing is we're going to pick up our twos, right? And then look at how we essentially, right? Oh my goodness, this is a long one. Right, open this up with our little parking pad right at the top. Okay, so how we open this up, how we press this open, okay, is really important. All right, so let's look at that now. Now, this is not the step where the parking pad information is important. Okay, so just leave that. It doesn't matter if you do it, this way, whatever. It doesn't matter. Now, as you sew these, especially when they're really long, okay, and I suggest you start with the shorter ones and you work your way to the longer ones. The shorter ones are a little easier to manage. As you sew these, the feed dogs, right, that pull the fabric through as you're sewing, right, underneath, bop, 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 will move faster, right? It'll pull the fabric through faster than the fabric that's just sitting on top, which is slightly, going through. But, the action of that makes the top fabric not pull through as fast as the bottom fabric, which then, especially in the long run, makes your fabric kind of arc, right? Like this. And so what we want to do is reverse that, but we're not getting to that step first. What we are addressing is the arc, right? Can you see that my fabric, just a little bit, right, is going like this? So I want to be mindful of that. And I would suggest looking at your fabric, determining which one is thinner, and then I put the thinner one on top, okay? And then we're going to just open this up and grab our iron, right? And just ever so slightly, pull this one a little bit. The entire reason for doing this way, again, is to open this seam up right here as much as possible without distorting the fabric, okay? So you want to just gently pull this here, right? And you can feel when the iron kind of pushes up against its neighbor, right? And so just glide over that real smoothly. And so this is now really open right here, right? Because I pushed against it and then went over it in a manner that continues to open this up like that, okay? Now, when you're doing a long run, don't, right, get overly aggressive. Do this where you kind of knock into the neighbor, right? And then slowly glide over. Do not knock the neighbor, right? This one right here, aggressively. You want to go smooth and smooth. Now my line is already starting to straighten out. It was kind of heading down this direction, so I'm really pleased about that. And that's just maintaining that this line down here is in fact, you know, straight. Okay, so then we just go through, and I'm just gonna do this dry first, and then once I have that done, I will go through and do the same thing again, gently, right? You don't want to, you know, start knocking this, especially if you knock the neighbor really hard, you will actually end up with kind of like this action, right? So you don't want that. You want to make sure that this is straight, and then when you iron it open, that this is straight. So now I'm just going to put a little sizing on it, just so that it will really grab onto that and make it a little bit more structured, so that I'm working with it. It's not just floppy fabric. Okay, that's that, and that's essentially it. Okay, this has to be right, because if you have a little bit of overfold here, right, on some and not on others, right, it's going to be a problem for you. So you just want this as open as possible, right, without distorting the fabric. So we are going to just go through and iron all of these that are sewn onto a neighbor, right? So they're nice and open without being distorted. If you hit them or pull them in any way, you got to be smooth yet a little bit strong, right? Just a little bit of tension is enough, right? Without getting overly aggressive, to make sure that this seam is open and perfect. So I'm going to go through and do all of these, right, in the same manner, okay? So let's just iron all of our strips open. And one more thing before I go on. There's a school of thought that thinks you should press your seams, right? So when you have it here, when you've sewn, essentially ironing the thread down into the work, right? And I do this, right? Some people don't, but I like to kind of get this. Now, the thread is more down into the fabric, right? Thus allowing me, when I, you know, open up this like that, to just lay a little bit flatter, right? So that's what we're gonna do. Go through, iron open all your strips, the 2s and the 4s, but keep them separated because the 2s and the 4s are going to serve a different purpose. All right, let's iron these all open, all of them, all. As I'm going through this, I'm thinking of more things. So traditionally, we press to the dark side, right? And so what that does is, see this little like seam allowance under here? It essentially hides that, right, under the darker fabric. Now for me, this isn't such a big deal because, you know, all my fabrics are pretty much a similar tone, right? But if I was dealing with, like, let's say this was a white fabric and this was a dark fabric, like a black fabric, I wouldn't want this little piece hidden under the white, right? Because it'll show. So I want it hidden under the darker color, which is here. So when you hear press to the dark side, that's what that means. And that's why you do it, so that you can hide that, right? Again, if this was black fabric on top here, and you had that little bit of, you know, black and white underneath here on this side under the white, you'd be able to see it and you wouldn't love it. So you better to hide it under here, under the dark one. All right. So when they say press to the dark side, that's what they mean. All right, let's do an extreme close-up here of how we want to, again, open these seams. I'm going to show it from a different angle, hopefully that you can see it. I purposely did this one wrong. It looks fine, right? It looks great. Side by side, no problem. So where is the problem? The problem right here is that this top fabric is actually folded over the other one. So when I pull them apart, look how much extra distance I get. That's, you know, a little bit right there, right? That shouldn't be there. So this top one again is folded over here, but you visually can't tell, right? So that's why we need to use the iron to just knock this a little bit more, right? A little more open to regain that fabric that was folded over here. Now, let me see if I can just point this out, okay? Can you see the distance between these two lines, right? Here's the seam, and here's what was folded over. That's actually, you know, not an insignificant thing, especially if you repeat it over and over and over, you know, about 40 times, right? This little distance is going to make a difference and really throw your work off. So let's make sure, again, that we just knock this up a little bit to the neighbor, right? Just gently, just like that, and pull the top fabric open, thus making this as open and flat as possible. Then just one note on the long pieces, which you'll probably be experiencing, right? And again, like we talked through, because the feed dogs pull the bottom fabric through faster than the top fabric, right? Like, look at this arc, right? I don't know if you can really see it. Right, let me just do one thing here so you can see it better. All right, the arc, right, goes down and then up and then back down. Okay, so we want to be mindful of that by lining, right, this top, right, across here. So to make that is perfectly straight, and you're not ironing it like this, where it's like a rainbow shape, right? That you're actually ironing it and deliberately, right, placing this line completely straight. All right, so be mindful of that. We want to, even at this point, deal with the arc. Okay, before you even get started here, what you want to be mindful of is, remember we cut these in half? And so half of them have the parking pad on them and half of them don't. So you may want to add a parking pad just with a pin or something to the top of one, or just ensure that as you're placing them in order, right, that you always have the one with the parking pad or not, right, all in the same direction, right? So just be mindful of that in the way that you are ironing them and then putting them into a pile, okay? We are just about done with this step, right? So we cut our ones, which are 2 inches by 3 3/4 inches, right? So here are all just my ones, little blocks, right? And then I have my 2s set aside, and then I have my 4s. Now, the next step that we're gonna do is, if you have long pieces, now I'm using scraps, so I have some that are really long, some that are really short, things like that. If you were just cutting everything salvage to salvage, everything's gonna be about the same length, and then that is fine. So what I'm gonna do now is, because I'm using like a bunch of different lengths, if I have any that are like super long, I'm gonna cut them in half, all right? But then again, mark where the top is, so that when we go on to the next step, which is connecting 2 of these guys, right, to make a 4, right? It's going to be the same process pretty much as what we did to join the 2, only this time we're adding this piece to that piece. Okay, so I'm just going to go through and cut my some strips that are super long, right? They're a little bit too long, so I'm going to cut them down, giving me the ability to get more variety, right, out of my 4s when I start addressing those and putting those together. Okay, so let's do that now. All right, so I'm just going to hold this parallel and then pull this up and cut that. This is not precision cutting, right? This is just making these long strips. That one's okay. Into half. Let's see. That one's pretty long, right? So I'm going to want to cut that one as well. Again, not precision cutting, just fold them in half and okay? So again, this is the top. I'm gonna wanna mark that, all right? So however you've decided to do that, whether you wanna just keep adding parking pads or just sometimes a little safety pin is enough. Kind of identify where the top is. Oh, these are all pretty good lengths. That's good. All right, so I'm just gonna go through and finish this up. All right, that is done. So I'm leaving my 2s here, I'm leaving my 1s here, and now I'm taking all of my 4s over to the sewing machine. Okay, so what we're gonna do next is essentially, like I said, just add the 2 strips together in the same manner as you added these 2 together. The same, right? So this is the trick though, okay? You want to try and get as much variety as possible, okay? So when I have these 2, I'd never put them next to each other because you're just gonna end up with a big block that looks super weird, okay? Because it's not gonna be the same kind of random pattern as this, because you're gonna have a big chunk that's really sticks out like a big square in the middle of your rectangles, okay? So you probably don't wanna put these together like that. What you could do, if you wanted to, is flip this one over and have these go like that, okay? That's fine. I still don't love it, but you know, sometimes when you're getting down to the end, you can certainly, you know, do that as well. So I'm gonna grab 2 strips here that are different, right? So all 4 are different. When you are going through this process, watch for which fabrics you're putting in the middle versus what fabrics you're putting on the ends, okay? If you, let's say you have this fabric and you keep putting it in the middle of every single one that you're doing as you're combining your 4s, that's gonna be a problem. So you want, let's just look at this dark olive, okay? So if you do this 4 like this, the next one you do, try and get it so that you have a dark green on the outside, and you'll see why in a bit. But again, what we're trying to create is the most variety possible so that when we cut these across this way, right, we have lots of different variations to pick from, thus putting it in here, because whether you like it or not, you know, like random is actually not random, and random is super hard to do. It just is like, you'll see. All right. We are ready to start assembling our 4s. Okay, so this is where the information for the parking pad becomes important. We know that we started the sewing, right, from the parking pads down, right? So what we're gonna wanna do is hold those parking pads together, flip it around, and start the other direction, right? So these 2 seams were coming up this way, so the one in the center needs to go down that way in order to kind of straighten out that curve a little bit, right? So if you had all 3 going this way, that wouldn't be great. But if you have the 2 on the sides going this way, but the one in the middle going this way, right? That'll kind of like straighten you out. And that's why we need this information here as far as where we started from, so that when we're doing the center seam, we can come back around and get that curve straightening us out. I'm sorry, I'm not very hilarious today. I hurt my knee so bad in CrossFit. My hand is sprained. I have a cold sore. Oh! Some days I just feel like I feel all of my 50 years and it's just going downhill from here. That's the thing is, when you're younger, you push yourself and you get stronger. When you're older, you push yourself and you injure yourself. It's just, don't bounce back the same way, do you? Nope. Okay, enough of that. So, good side, right? Good side to good side. All right, you'll see for this step, I'm still gonna use the parking pads. Why? Because it allows you to keep on sewing between the pieces without ever having to pick up your needle, right? So I'm just gonna grab some more pieces here and just keep going. I never have to pick up my fabric or pick up the needle. You just keep on going. All right, then just to finish up this step, you're just going to do this to all of your 4s. Okay, case that wasn't clear. All right, so your ones and your twos are over there, and then all your fours you're gonna assemble. Again, trying to get the most diversity as possible, so be mindful of that, okay? So that as you're picking up fabrics and putting them next to a neighbor for your fours, that they're as different and as wide a variety as you can possibly make, okay? We are ready to start doing our fours like this, right? So same process as before, just get your ones out of the machine and set your seams by ironing them down into the work, all right? And then opening this up, and same as we did before, just gently knocking those neighbors open here, all right? And after I do it with a hot iron quick, you can see I had to rip out a seam there. Oops, did the wrong seam allowance. It happens. All right, and then just a final press, all right? Just keep all those seams nice and open. That's it. So do all your fours like this and set them aside. The next thing we're going to do is actually cut the strips that we've sewn together. Okay, we'll start with the twos and then we'll go on to the fours. Here we go. For this step, we're going to do something different. Okay, so normally when we're cutting, we put our line on the ruler down on the edge. All right, for this, in order to get a better sense of where the actual middle is, which is the important part, right? We're going to line up our ruler with the seam. So line your ruler up with the seam, cut off the excess, right? Then I'm going to flip it around. And this same technique is going to apply whether we're doing twos or fours. All right, let me just scoot this down here. Okay, so now I have a perfect 90-degree angle. You saw how I just squared that up. Now, 2 inches, again, what we're doing is we're looking at the edge, right, that I just squared up here, and then also this one in the middle, which is super important, right? We're always tracking that there's a straight line on the seam. So that's a perfect 2 inches. Give that a cut. Oh, and look, twos, right? So I'm going to go through and cut all my twos. Next, we're going to look at the fours, okay? But the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go hunting for extra ones and twos, okay? So as you can see here, I have the perfect opportunity to pick up another couple of twos, right? So why waste this fabric? I'm just going to square this up here. Again, what I'm looking at is the line that's along the seam here, right? And then look at the top, look at the bottom, just make sure it looks really good and square. We're gonna cut that off, and then I'm gonna set this aside to be cut into twos. So I'll put that in my two with my other twos, right? Now, since I've already squared this up, I'm just gonna flip it around, right? Because I cut with my right hand. And then I'm gonna look at 2 inches here, making sure that this is all lined up. I have this 2-inch line here, right? And then the center here, it's looking good. So I'm gonna go ahead and cut that. Fours. Okay, so we're just gonna keep doing that, keep cutting fours, and let's pretty much end here for today, because this is going to take a lot for you to cut all the twos and all the fours. So that pretty much does it for us today. So go ahead, cut all your ones, your twos, and your fours, and then we'll assemble them next time. But that's a lot to do between now and next time for you and me both. My knee must be feeling better. It's just one of those days. Anyhow, onward. See you next time. Bye.